Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, improve, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Brent Pohlman. Hi, Brent.
Good morning, Adi.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great as well.
Good.
I'm excited about today's conversation because we're going to talk about leadership and how to lead from the heart and with gratitude. And I know you're an expert in this subject, and we're going to dive just right into it. So first of all, let's give you a little bit more of an introduction. So please tell us more about yourself and your company.
Sure. Again, my name is Brent Pohlman, CEO of Midwest Laboratories. And I basically took over for my father, who started this company in 1975. I call ourselves a 49-year-old startup. People laugh when I say that, but I feel like we are going through the startup mode of fast growth. Over the last 5 years, we have grown tremendously, and leadership is the key to success. That's what I've just really found over coming back to the business here. And Midwest Laboratories is an analytical testing. We do testing in the areas of human health, animal health, agriculture, and environmental. And what does that all mean? Basically, we're a production lab. We get a lot of samples in, and we get results out in 3 to 5 days. When I say a lot, on the agricultural side, we do a lot of soil testing. I would say we're probably the largest soil testing lab in the country. After harvest time, growers send their samples in for one more fertilizer or nutrient application to their fields, and we'll get anywhere from 30,000 to 40,000 soil samples a day. And then on the animal health side, pet food is our strongest area. We get about 1,000 to 2,000 samples a day, year round. So it takes a team to really do the analysis, get results out. And it's been what my dad started in 1975, again, has just flourished and grown over the years. And I'm so grateful to him and the team I have around me that we can absolutely take this company to another level. And that's what we're trying to do here in this stage of growth that we are in currently and have been in for the last few years. So that's a little bit of background about our company. And no, I'm looking forward to talking about the leadership and what it takes to do that. So
absolutely. So let's hear a little bit more of the background and the story of what led you to talk about leadership and writing a book about leadership. I mean, when you came back to the business, what did you encounter that made you want to actually delve into the area of leadership?
Yes, great question. So I did, when I came back in 2005, I came back in the marketing area, and I had so many ideas. I came from the corporate world. My dad and I had a pact right out of college. He did not, both of us did not want me to come back to the business right away. I had to go out and get some experience before I could come back. So I worked at a lot of big corporations, and then came back, and I really wanted to implement change really right away. And I was really gung-ho. I saw a bunch of things I wanted to put in place. And my dad said, hey, hold on. You know, I'm a forward thinker. I've always been like a futuristic type of person. And he says, you need to learn the business. You need to know the insides and outs. And my dad was in the day-to-day operations his whole life up until he retired 4 years ago at the age of 80. So what that first 2005 to 2015, I had to learn the business. I will tell you, it was very hard for me because we were lean and mean. We had 90 people. We were putting in long hours. We had a lot of, I would say, head knowledge. People had a ton of head knowledge, but once that head knowledge walked out the door, we lost a lot. We had to overcome those types of things. And I kept seeing this over and over. And then in 2015, my dad had two partners. And as soon as those two retired, it was my dad and I. So for the next 5 years, I saw something in my dad I'd never seen, but it was like the handcuffs came off and he wanted to do all the changes that he ever wanted. And so we were going at this rapid, accelerated pace. And I would just tell you, when you're in a reactive state all the time, that is not a good place to be in. You have things that I did not anticipate were high turnover because of a change in the way things were run. I myself was highly reactive, and I just saw my dad, and I was in the day-to-day. I was questioning everything, and I knew something was going to have to happen. It got so bad that I thought by getting there faster, I always wanted to get there faster and more faster. I would brought in 12 people from the outside to assume leadership roles. I had no idea what that would do to our culture. Within 2 months, I had several people come up to me and say, "Hey, if you don't do something, we're going to walk out." So the next day, all of them were gone except one. I kept one. And it was from that start that we redefined ourselves with our core values, and we got on a path to how to make this work. And one of the key learnings, and the person that I kept, Dana Berkey, who is our chief strategy officer, she gave me these 3 words that have resonated with me, and I say them every single day, is people, process, and technology. And it always has to be in that order. People first. So you got to have the right people in the right places, and you got to treat people with respect. And that's where our new vision, our new mission, and our new core values came from. And we were doing this all at the same time that COVID hit in 2020. So all of these changes, we had to do something that changed the way we did things. And so people first, processes, we had to start documenting everything that we were doing. If we were going to get consistent and have consistent results, because what was happening during that reactivity period is we were gaining companies and losing companies as fast as I can. And I was putting on my sales hat, trying to keep as many people coming in that were leaving because we weren't consistent, because our processes, we have methods, obviously, in the science, you got to have methods, but you have to make sure everything is in line, even outside, like almost like an operations manual. So process and documenting those, it's not sexy, it's not the thing to do, but you have to do it. And I'll
Hey,
never
this is
forget.
what we do day in and day out. So
Exactly.
yes, that's right. It
So
is not always the most exciting, but it's super,
it
super
is.
important. So let's talk about it a little bit. Yeah, I know it's
Mhm.
it's people, processes, technology, absolutely. And you mentioned something at the beginning where you had people walk out and they had the knowledge in their heads. And that's one thing that we see a lot, and that's why companies call us, is because of that knowledge transfer, is because that institutional knowledge. I mean, it's 49 years now for your company to exist. A lot of knowledge walked out the doors, right? I mean, some of it stayed, some of it was in your dad's head, some of it you learned, but a lot of knowledge walked out. So from your experience, why knowledge transfer is so important?
Oh, it's absolutely the key. And then you have to work on your infrastructure. That was the other part. Most people have goals of growing and hitting these sales numbers. For the last 4 years, again, our goal has been to create the infrastructure to make sure that we can be sustainable for the future, because you're going to get hit with so many changes. People are going to come and go, but you got to have those processes in place. And during that time, from 2019 to today, we went from 110 employees to now we almost have 300. So when you bring on that many, when you grow at that rate, you better have some consistency in the way that you're going to do things. And it's really helped, made us stronger. It's made the culture better, again, because they know that people are valued here. But you're absolutely right. You have to put those things in place if you're going to be successful. And it was a huge learning for me. And that's reason really for the book was, how do we become effective leaders and how do we bring others on? But you've got to really do those things. The people, process, and technology was just a huge insight for me and a good way of thinking for me to get that done.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about those systems and the infrastructure. What are the key components that you found that are important to have as part of your infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. We were very flat. It was like 2 or 3 people and then everybody else. And then I'll never forget the other one that I would say was probably the key, and I didn't like at the time, was I said that my dad was in the operations his whole life. I had my leadership team around me. They came to me and said, Brent, we need you out of the day-to-day. We need a new campus. We need these things. We need you to be the future and the vision for the company. Let us take on the operations. Let us handle that. If you trust us, we'll be able to see this through, but you need to get out. You're in the way. I was definitely in the way. I was totally in the way of doing things. So it was probably, again, it was hard at first, but it was most necessary. If you're a leader, you need to trust your team, and you need to set the vision. When people come up to you and ask how the company's doing and where it's going, you better be able to provide an answer. And that's really the difference of managing and leading, is that piece is getting out of the day-to-day, stop being in the way, and let your team take over, because that's the only way you're going to be successful in my mind.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Absolutely, I agree with you. Okay, so what are some of the components of that infrastructure that you put in, that you said, you needed those systems that didn't exist?
Yeah, we put a layer of 15 directors in place. So we had some directors. We actually broke up, as I talked about, the different industries. Before we were like, well, there was this, so we did it by what was run in the different labs. But by having an industry focus, now people were understanding the why behind their tests. We had so many people here for even 10, 15 years who would run a test, but had no idea what the results meant to the end user. So I think by educating and getting things in a more simplistic way for people to understand that they make a difference with their testing, and those results really are key to food safety, to agriculture, to pets and pet food manufacturers, and they need that information and safety. It brings it all together, but you have to have that and educate people why they're doing what they're doing. And I think so many people are just doing tasks and they have no idea why they're doing them. And I think by capturing that why and capturing the essence of what they're doing and why it's so valuable and why it's so important, it gives people a sense of responsibility and pride in the work that they do.
You're absolutely right. I mean, whenever we document any processes and procedures, we always include the why. I mean, we start the why of why documenting, but we always include the why, because otherwise, when somebody reads the procedure later, they can go, well, that doesn't make sense and I will change it. But if you know the why, then it's not going to get changed, because there is a reason behind it and there is an understanding behind it. So I completely agree that's crucial. Very, very important. Good. What other, let's say, we have entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now. You 3X your business. What other advice would you give to those entrepreneurs?
I would say these things do take time. I know everyone wants things fast, including myself. Really invest the time in your people. I talk about Dana as the Chief Strategy Officer. She invests so much of her time sitting down with the directors and making sure they understand where we're trying to go, what they need to do, how to better communicate with their staff, those types of things. She started with the directors probably 2 years ago, and now we're to the supervisors. And then hopefully, we'll have training in place for all the employees. But you really got to start somewhere and really build a consistent message, because people will want to go back to the old ways. We all are human, and we know a lot of people have been here a while. They want to go back to what they were comfortable with. But once they see the value in what we're doing, once they grasp onto that and really understand it, again, that takes time. It just really, and I say time, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a couple of weeks. It's got to be reinforced continually. And people are going to make mistakes, and people are going to do some things. We learn from our mistakes and that, but it's really been a journey for me to see over the last 4 or 5 years how we have to continually drive that message all the time, even including myself, make sure that we're consistent and bring a consistent message. And it starts internally. Everyone wants to focus on the customers, but you better take care of your employees first, because they're the bread and butter of everything that you do. And I think that whole piece of working closely, I call it coaching. I think with leadership, you have to also coach. So you have to have some coaching skills as part of this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say was the success, your successful action. So how did you manage to make sure that those processes are being followed by all of your employees, and actually it became part of the culture? How did you do that?
Well, I think it really does start with the leader. I had no idea the power, even myself, when I was walking down the hall. I used to be this really, I'm a processor. So sometimes you can see me processing and a very super serious look. But I had to work on myself first. If you're gonna improve your leadership, work on yourself first. Make sure that you have yourself strong core values and that you bring your A game every single day. I do not want people to see me frowning. I had no idea that walking in with a mad or disgusting look and the power that that sends to everybody looking at you, you need to, I learned that I had to really work on myself, and that took some time too, as well. And you really have to do that. The other one that has been key for me is connecting with employees. I don't know everybody's name, and that bothers me. You can tell I get really uncomfortable about that. But when you can call people by their name, that really shows respect. That's probably one of the biggest lessons, and I put that in the book, is that learn people's names. Everybody counts here. And you have to know when people hear their name, it just means it shows that you care. So I really am a big person about really knowing and calling people by their name. So I'm still working at that, and I'm going to try and work at that all the time, so that if I see anybody down the hallway, they know that they have a purpose and meaning. And I think that's critical when people know their value at their workplace.
For sure. And that's part of the leadership and transformation, in terms of like really leading correctly. But my question is really like in terms of the processes, right? I mean, you said, you documented, you created processes. Maybe you didn't run into it, but many of the entrepreneurs out there, they face with the problem of creating those processes, but then having a hard time enforcing it or implementing it and make it part of the culture.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that? How did you make sure that those processes are actually being implemented and used by everyone?
I think it's really, it does come down to, you can't be everywhere at all the time. You really have to put the trust into your directors and your supervisors, and they have to, again, enforce and own those processes themselves. When they own them and they go over them with their team, we don't deviate from them. When we have audits here, even on our audits, they constantly go through our processes. And what we had to do was really put a quality team. We had 2 quality people at one time. Today, we have over 25. That quality team, we call them quality control analysts or QC analysts. They work with those departments to make sure that those procedures are followed strictly. And if there's any deviation, it's communicated to the supervisor as well. That's on the analytical testing side. On the operational side, again, we have directors meetings once a week. And again, they go over those things that they go over we do it every meeting, go over what are the company goals, what are the goals for this month or this week, this month. And again, to reinforce that back into their own departments. But it does take reinforcement all the time. I can't stress that enough. You can't just hand somebody a procedure and for the next year, even, there's going to be deviations. I guarantee you, if it's not enforced or if you just hand it over. And I understand there's, as you're smaller, it's really hard to do that. But if you can put that in place, think about trying to play catch up for 49 years. That's where we're at today. And then that's why we have so many people too, is because we've had to play catch up. And maybe I'm sure you see that a lot in companies, that it was never documented. I hear that bugs me, but it's never documented. If it's never documented, okay, the time is right now to start documenting it. But right. You have to have a culture that really puts that in place, that you really want that, because the end goal is you want to be consistent. You want consistent behaviors, as far as people, and consistent output through your production, as well as, again, consistent interaction with the clients. And it makes it, I think people are starting to see, it makes it so much easier when you know the process, or you can look and tell somebody, hey, I know what the method is, or I know what the analysis goes into that analysis. And maybe the client only sent like 10 grams of sample and you need a pound, or something like that. Even something simple as that. Everyone can see and has access to all the different processes and methods. And if there's any question, again, there's a process for that. You go and you talk to this person, you talk to this person. So it sounds like a lot of rules, but it really is not. It's just a way to be consistent. And it really makes things a lot easier. I can't say that enough. You have to take the time to really put the processes in place. It is the key.
Absolutely. It is a key, and it's also key that they're being used. And I love what you just said in terms of making it part of your day-to-day management. It's consistency, but it's also accountability on a weekly basis that those processes are being used and they're not being forgotten because it's being brought up in the management meetings, which I highly recommend to our clients and to our listeners, is that once you have it documented, then make it part of the day-to-day running of the company. If something doesn't go well, as you said, like the QCers, the QC analysis and analyzers, they are going to go, analysts, they're going to go and they're going to look at what process was not followed and make sure that that person that didn't follow it, make sure that they follow it. So you do have to utilize it. When you are doing assessments of what works, what doesn't work, take a look at your processes, right? I mean, that is key. But also before that, you have to have a great culture where everybody's cooperating, just like what you were explaining. So I think that is spot on.
Yeah, no, I think another good example of that was during COVID. We didn't have a COVID handbook. And by the time into 2 years, I think our COVID handbook was over 300 pages because we had so many different things that were, as a result of the pandemic, we never closed down as an essential business. So we had to make things work, but we had everything from starting the day earlier because of do you remember the social distancing? I know it sounds funny to say that now, but our buildings were so tight here that we had to start our day at 5:30 in the morning and we ended at 11 o'clock at night because we had to put into place social distancing in all our areas to make sure that our place was a safe place to work at that time. So again, I think the COVID really accelerated the need for processes and really showed people that we have to have these things in order, again, to be consistent and for safety. Safety was our number one priority, but consistency. And it really does help with communication and makes things so much easier to know and not have to, I say not have to think about, but really when you have a strong culture of processes, you don't have to think about them as much. I don't know if I should say that too much until you get it all documented, but that's really, it does make, there is a sense or a peace of mind when you can say that without a fact that I know how that's going to run. And I know how you get the results to that analysis. So there's a peace of mind there. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Brent, what's your experience in terms of keeping those processes up to date? Like, what do you do in order to make sure that they don't go obsolete?
There's a constant review every single month. And again, I tell you, the QC analysts, that's their full-time job. They are always looking at process, always talking with the supervisors and the analysts directly and making sure that and if there are modifications, which there always are, that those are documented as well and time dated and stamped, and that the old ones are thrown out so that we don't go back to the old. And they're tested. If you change something, it's got to be tested. So I would say just adding that layer of quality control has really made a difference in the way we do things and helped us be consistent. So I would say get a team that just does that part. And it may start with one or two people, which we had for years. But sometimes when you grow, again, one or two people are not enough and you need a team around you. But that's what we used to have, is 1 to 2 people, but they can't do everything. And it's really hard with 1 to 2 people to really enforce that across the company. So I would say it's to your advantage to have a team that does that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brent, that's been a great conversation. So if people want to buy your book, where should they go?
Heartstrongproductions.com is where they can find my book. And again, the book is more about yourself and working on your own leadership. And but I think that is a big part of this. But I do love talking about this. I didn't used to, but it's really a passion of mine. And I'm so glad that we really spent this time focusing on processes, because it's a big part of it, definitely.
It definitely is. I mean, that's basically the conduit in order to accomplish everything that you learn about leadership and being a great leader, because it's systematized. There is order, there is prediction, there is consistency. And then if you're also a very good leader, which has to start with that, then you can really thrive as a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you about this.
Thank you, Brent. And before we end, I want to give a shout out to James Bracken IV, who basically introduced us, because you became a guest on this podcast because we saw you as a guest on his podcast. So we're going to include that in the show notes as well. So thank you, James, for the introduction.
Yes.
And thank you, Brent,
James,
for all the knowledge and for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.